Hi, I am Jack Brewer with Expanding Frontiers Research, and I'm going to talk a little bit today about some Freedom of Information Act basics, some FOIA basic instruction and information, and hopefully some of you will find it helpful and perhaps even want to interact with us about your FOIA work and give us some feedback and comments on the video as well. One of the first things we want to do if we start on the FOIA process is decide how we want to interact with agencies and government bodies. This can be local government, federal government, it can be the state level, it can be intelligence agencies, military agencies. So you're going to want to decide what your contact information is going to be with these agencies. And one of the reasons that's important is it might become subject to the Freedom of Information Act itself. In some instances, that's the case, and particularly in interacting with smaller government bodies, sometimes correspondence with them, emails, letters, might be part of a FOIA release in itself. So in my particular case, I decided to get a post office box and I use that. And you might like to do the same. Perhaps even a inexpensive phone like a track phone or something as well, that you use that number for your contacts in the research community and things of that nature. But I use a post office box, and that's the contact point of contact that I prefer to use. Now, the steps of the process are fairly simple. You'll want to decide what you're looking for, what kind of information you're looking for, identify where it would be sent, and then compose the request. The main thing I think that you'll want to take into consideration is don't get caught up on it and make it more complicated than is necessary. Be tolerant of yourself, realize you'll know more about it later than when you start, and don't worry about making small mistakes. Just the main thing is get the requests done, fill them out, send them in, and learn from there and evolve with the process and your learning experience with the FOIA. So you'll want to identify what kind of information you're looking for, and then you'll want to identify where to send it. You'll want to decide what the agency is that you would submit this to. One of the main agencies I work with is the FBI. I find their process relatively straightforward, and they have an online portal to submit information through so that it's all electronic. Other agencies like the National Archives or NARA, National Archives and Records Administration, they have an email address that can be used. The CIA has an online submission process. I don't find the CIA particularly helpful in many, not all, but many circumstances, because one of the things you'll have to keep in mind with CIA is they require a public acknowledgement of the information at some point. If you're looking for information on one of their contacts or a subject that they have investigated, you'll want to be able to cite a newspaper clipping, an online statement, something official from one of their spokespeople. For instance, just somebody claiming to be with them on late night talk radio isn't good enough. We have to have statements from them that we can cite. Other release documents, things like that can be good, but CIA is pretty rigid and traditionally has had the backing of the courts as well and keeping some levels of secrecy. Now, the FBI, they are particularly forthcoming in many cases with deceased individuals. So, when people of interest have passed away or may have even been deceased for a while, you can fill out requests on this person and ask them for any information they have pertaining to or cross-referencing the individual. Now, in that request, you will want to include some information like the date of birth, the date of death, the place of birth, and the place of death, the city of birth and death. You'll also want to include an obituary or a link to an obituary or some type of newspaper clipping. It can be an online link that verifies the death of the individual. Now, before you go ahead and submit your request, you'll want to search online databases. For instance, the FBI has what they call their vault. The CIA has an online reading room as well. And you'll want to search some of that, not only to make sure that the information you're seeking hasn't already been released, but you might find things of interest. For instance, well, first, before I get to that, let's pull up slide 1. Thank you. And we'll take a look here at a basic, somewhat of a boilerplate that I use. I don't, like in years past, we used to be more formal and put the agency's address across the top in more of a formal letter. I don't particularly worry about that anymore because, as I mentioned, we typically are doing this online through email or through some type of FOIA portal. So I do like to date it for a couple of reasons. Then you'll want to inform them that it's a request under the Freedom of Information Act. Then you will want to request the records cross-referenced or pertaining to and explain the nature of the records you're seeking. If applicable, explain a date range. Now, you may want to just let them know that if fees are applicable, to notify you of estimated cost before filling your request. Here, I explained that I was requesting a fee waiver based on working with Expanding Frontiers Research and being part of the media as defined in the Freedom of Information Act. So if you have a website or you are planning on publishing your work, you might want to use some of this language as well and request a fee waiver. If you do that, you'll want to include a representation of your work or a link to your website and show how you are sharing the information with the public that you're acquiring. Then I still say if fees are deemed applicable, to please notify me prior to processing. And then let them know how you would like the information provided to you. I, for instance, like it in email, in PDF when possible, and thank them and be sure and include your name and contact information so that they can get that stuff to you. Now, you'll also want to check the websites and make sure in those reading rooms that you're not requesting something that has already been released. And also, sometimes this will allow us ways to find things to request in themselves. We can find documents that are of interest, and maybe in those documents there will be things that we might want to look for. But when I was writing Wayward Sons, a book about NICAP and the intelligence community, I looked at the CIA website because I was seeking documents on former Director of Central Intelligence Roscoe Hillenkoetter. But I knew if I just do some kind of FOIA request on a former director, there's just going to be a massive amount of material. And so I was kind of trying to figure out exactly what I'm looking for. Like, how will I word, I'd like all documents on Hillenkoetter that you don't want to give me, like, how am I going, what am I going to tell them I'm looking for? So slide 2, please. I was looking through the online reading room for the CIA, and I came across a letter here that was from Hillenkoetter while he was the Director of Central Intelligence to an administrator at the ECA, which was the Economic Cooperation Administration. And in this letter, it's a 1949 letter, he was clarifying that the ECA and the CIA had an existing relationship, and that he wanted to up the information he was receiving from the ECA to raise its level of classification. And he wanted to take it from secret to include top secret. And the ECA was a government organization. It was not considered an intelligence agency. And this was significant to me when I found it just browsing the website without having to even submit a FOIA request, because I was already aware at that point in time, as covered in Wayward Sons, that members of Counsel Services, which was a public relations firm working with Townsend Brown and NICAP, they incorporated NICAP. Co-founders of Counsel Services were employed with and had ties to the Economic Cooperation Administration. So that was significant to me, and something that I really wouldn't have even known at that point in time how to word my FOIA request. I was able to find just looking through the CIA's online reading room there. And so that was pretty neat. And thank you. And other times, as I mentioned, the FBI can be very good for seeking information on deceased people. So let's go to slide 3, please. And this is what some of that might look like. This was also done while I was writing Wayward Sons, and I informed them of what I was looking for, files on a man named Nicholas de Roquefort, who was a NICAP organizer. I informed them what information I knew about when and where he was born and died. I gave them a little bit, just a couple sentences more information about what I knew about him. I gave them the link to the obituary and told them, about fees and how I hope to receive the information if there was any. And thank you. And so that resulted in the FBI sending me several pages of what to me was important information on Nicholas de Roquefort that was very helpful and relevant in my book and my research. All of it's in the book. Quite a bit of it is on my website, the UFO Trail. But something else that happened during that interaction with the FBI was they informed me that the National Archives may have additional responsive records. So that's not unusual with in my experience with making requests to the FBI. And when that happens, the FBI will tell us what to ask NARA for. They will give us some file numbers. So I then advised NARA that FBI had given me this information and I requested specific files from them. And they responded that they had about 200 pages of apparently responsive documents in that file, and that Nicholas de Roquefort was the subject of the file. And that was back in 2000. They told me it would take about 2.5 years. And that time is up now. It was their initial projected due date was in September of this year. And they have not finished processing the records and made them available to me. I've been in correspondence with them, and they, of course, during COVID, and they're always behind anyway, but they, of course, experience more delays, and there's going to be some delay with it. But I'm sharing that for a few reasons. One, to let you know that even when you get told it's going to be 39 months or something like that, that time does eventually pass. And the requests do eventually come to fruition. Another reason I'm sharing it is in this particular instance, there will be fees along with the request, costs for handling the request. That's more common in the circumstance like this where declassification is required, that NARA has to go through those pages line by line if they have never been released before, and see what is subject to the Freedom of Information Act and what would be exempt from it, and then provide the material. That there's a waiting list for that, and it takes time, and that's what can take 2, 3, 4 years on a document of that size. Their approximate, if I recall correctly, estimate at that time was about $160. So these are the types of things that Erica Lukes and I formed a nonprofit corporation in order to help with and make available to the public. So those of you that do find this of interest and would like to help and are in a position to help, we would be very grateful if you would go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org and make a donation through our secure PayPal link. It's the donate button that's on the website. And this is the type of things that your donations help with, is costs and fees for doing this type of work. And thank you in advance for that. Now let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this was from September of this year. And when we say be specific in your request. This is the kind of thing we might be looking for. Erica Lukes and the good people of Utah were aware of some activities portrayed on the Secret of Skinwalker show, and we were able to craft these into a FOIA request to the FAA just to see what kinds of material we might come up with, if any. And we requested temporary flight restriction, or TFR requests, pertaining to, we knew a general time frame and the general location. And we thought that it might involve some type of laser show. So then we had the rest of the usual information in the request to please notify us of costs, that we'd prefer it to be delivered in PDF if possible. And we were just kind of seeing what we might could learn. Thank you. And the next slide shows us what the FAA did provide was a couple of pages, and it was this is part of the FAA response to someone that was acting on behalf of Skinwalker Ranch, and they had apparently requested to restrict air traffic during some type of event, the laser show or some type of event that Skinwalker was apparently filming and doing. And we can see some of the criteria that was required to do this. For instance, the second paragraph from the bottom tells us the aircraft observers had to be positioned in a clear way and to have a kill switch ready in the event that they did observe any aircraft and saw it coming, and that would provide the safety precautions. And so I will post this so people that are interested in it, thank you, so people that are interested in it can see more of it. And these are the types of things as well that we might can spring off of and then do more requests about maybe, we could discuss that, but in our particular circumstance, I was interested then in any more correspondence that the FAA may have had with the representative. And if this is public information subject to the Freedom of Information Act, then it seems reasonable to take a look at it and maybe get some ideas about different activities that are happening. And then the more of this material we put together, the more that we can begin to ascertain about a bigger picture. For instance, many of you have probably read the work we did at EFR about Phenomicon and the Skinwalker Ranch. And that's a circumstance where much of the material was provided free of cost from county governments surrounding the Uinta Basin, around the Uinta Basin. Some of it did require fees, though. And again, that's the kind of thing that we formed the nonprofit organization in order to give people a way to help with that, in order for us to raise funds for projects like that. Now, something else that we requested that was of interest to us was Joseph Firmage had a company that he called Mini One. And they did a number of things with this group. Some of you familiar with the Skinwalker lore and the associations that Mr. Firmage had with some of the people now in those circles and the ATIP circles might be aware of that. And I mentioned I find the FBI a good source of material. I mentioned, for instance, I wrote about in Wayward Sons that while the CIA is tight and pretty restrictive on their records, sometimes we can learn about things the CIA is doing through the FBI, because the FBI does so much investigation for security clearances. Back in the day, like in the NICAP days, pretty much Director Hoover had his finger on the pulse of any and everything that he thought might at some point even be of interest. So they can be a good resource even for things that we might not initially associate with the FBI. So we at EFR submitted FOIA requests to the FBI on Mini One. And next slide, please. One of the materials we received was a transcript dated 2009 that indicates an interview was conducted with some employee of Mini One Networks, and it's heavily redacted. And I will post this document as well. And there was a second page. It's a 2-page document in this PDF that the FBI provided. That's not it yet, but thank you. But that first one is it's a 2-page document, and it indicates that employees of Mini One Network were interviewed. So now let's go ahead and pull the second one up. And now this is actually with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And what this is the result of a request we submitted to the SEC on while we can't request documents on specific people, we can with the FBI and with the SEC on some of their concerns, their entities, their companies. And this is a letter that they provided Mr. Firmage, explaining to him that after an investigation was conducted on Mini One, that it was the commission would not be recommending enforcement action be taken against them. And so, thank you. What these documents told us was that there was more material to be found. So we also requested the documents from the SEC pertaining to the investigation to see what is publicly available. The SEC responded that it had a great deal of material. I believe it was in the thousands of documents. Anyway, it was an inordinate amount of material. So a representative from the SEC, a FOIA officer, helpfully participated in a telephone call with me, and we reduced the scope of the request to records pertaining to interviews that were made during the investigation and any final report that came out about it. And we're hoping to have an interim update on the status of that request any day now. And that's the kind of thing as well that we are anticipating some fees for processing and clearing it for FOIA release. Now, the FBI material that we received on Mini One, that is of interest as well for reasons such as Again, since Mr. Firmage is very much alive and well and with us, it is considered an invasion of privacy for the FBI to release documents on an alive individual if it has records on them. That's why we wait until someone is deceased to seek those records. It's just an FBI thing. But we can seek records on the companies they own, as you can see. Now, in that release as well, they informed us that there were several pages that they withheld that were exempt from release under the FOIA. We appealed that withholding, and the appeal was denied, and we are considering taking legal action. The next step is a lawsuit, and there are attorneys who will do that work pro bono, but they do still require that their clients pay for the filing fees. So again, this is the kind of thing that we hope that you'll be moved to help us with. And please go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org, click the donate button, and this is the kind of thing that your money goes towards to help us with these filing fees, processing fees, and that type of thing in our FOIA work. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this helpful. Hope you found it interesting. Let us know how your FOIA work goes. Reach out to us, interact, and we'll do some interesting and fun work together on this kind of stuff. So remember, those steps are: identify what you're looking for, identify the agency and place to submit your request, and then compose your request. And don't get bogged down. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Just get those requests out and then do some more of it. So thanks for watching. We appreciate you.